Welcome back. You're watching World Talks, and I'm your host, Klaudia Czerwińska. The post-Soviet countries located in Central Asia are a point of interest for many countries in the region and beyond. On one hand, Russia wants to maintain its influence. China wants to dominate them economically, whereas Turkey and the European Union want to influence them politically. As we speak, another attempt to bring the European Union closer to Kyrgyzstan is being carried out by Germany. Berlin is hosting the country's president, Sadyr Zhaparov. We will discuss why the EU needs closer cooperation with Central Asian countries with our guest, Nooralhaq Nasimi, director of the Afghanistan and Central Asia Association. Hello and welcome to the program.
Hello, good afternoon.
So I think it's very fair to start by asking this question. Olaf Scholz has definitely a lot on his plate. The EU seems to be having a lot on its plate. Why do you think Germany decided to host this meeting? And why is there an effort to bring those Central Asian countries closer to Europe?
I think everything is happening now in Central Asia is part of the great game that we had in the 16th, 17th centuries. And Afghanistan, I think that also part of the great game that is now we see the return of the Taliban cooperating with the Chinese government. And also I saw that the defense minister of Russia, they visited Afghanistan, started talking with the Taliban about the maybe some kind of investment in Russia as well as in Afghanistan. But anyway, answering your question specifically around the Central Asia, this is part of the great game. The Chinese, on the one hand, started their the Silk Road initiative. They have already started huge investment in Central Asia. And the Russian also, I don't think that the Russian easily give up with the Central Asian former republic. As you know that the Central Asia, they were part of the USSR, which collapsed in 1991 after the serious war between Afghanistan and the USSR, which resulted the collapse of the USSR as well as the collapse of the Warsaw Pact. So now, when the Germans want to host an event in Kyrgyzstan, did you ask me the German want to organize the event in Kyrgyzstan, or they want to host something in Germany?
No, I was talking about the meeting in Berlin. I wanted to take a broader look at why the European Union is particularly reaching out in that direction.
No, the European community, they don't want to allow maybe the Chinese to increase their influence as well as their investment in Central Asia. And this is the reason for Germany that they are hosting a conference for the Central Asian maybe future cooperation. Remember, just last week we had a big conference in Baku, the capital of Azerbaijan, where the international community, they come together to support the poorest nation in the world. Then we can see that the G7 is happening very soon. And then now the Germans, they are talking about an international conference on Central Asia, in particular for Kyrgyzstan. So this is part of the big competition between the EU and China as well as Russia.
So you mentioned that there is a lot at stake. But if the European Union was to attract these Central Asian countries and pull it away from the sphere of the Russian influence, what does Europe has to offer to those countries?
I think that the investment can be an important way to attract Central Asian into the EU. Remember, we have to understand that the Central Asian, they have a lot of resources, minerals, such as gas, oil, as well as other important things like uranium, lithium. So this is one of the main reasons, as I said, that this big competition is going on between the China, Russia, and the EU. For the EU, they need to maybe invest more on cultural exchange, maybe a student visa for the Central Asian to come to.
Do you think that's something that those Central Asian countries would be interested in? Is it enough to be able to pull them from the sphere of influence of Russia?
I feel that the EU, they are in a stronger position, especially because of the democratic values that we have in the EU, comparing to China and Russia. The people in China as well as in Russia, they are facing serious inequality, human rights violation. What, for example, the Russian doing in Ukraine, as well as the Chinese against the Taiwan, the people of Hong Kong. So this is, I think, one of the biggest strengths for the EU to use the democratic values that the people in the EU are having comparing to people in Russia and China.
So after the full-scale invasion of Russia on Ukraine, an idea emerged in the European Union to sever the ties with Russia when it comes to dealing with oil and gas and economy. There were packages of sanctions which still function. Would you say it's possible? Could these countries actually replace Russia when it comes to being a supplier of oil and gas?
To be honest, when you visit to the Central Asian countries, because they were living under the USSR, under the totalitarian regime, where they didn't have any freedom of expression, freedom of movement, freedom of speech. The people in Central Asia, according to my communication with number of these people here, even in London, at the London universities, for example, we have a big Central Asian society at the UCL. They prefer to be more closer to the EU, especially to the Western countries, rather than China and Russia. So this is up to the EU, how they can use these opportunities, especially, for example, the English language became a very, very popular in Central Asia. Everyone is trying to learn English, including in Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan. So this is another strength for the EU, as well as for Great Britain, maybe as well, to be part of this cooperation in the Central Asian future. This is, I think, that I believe that more maybe soft power should be used in order to reduce the influence of China and Russia, because they don't have a very good track record of in human rights in their countries back home.
And how would you say, what would be the response of Moscow and Beijing when it comes to the steps that now Germany and the European Union are taking towards these countries?
I don't think that they can do anything. They are also heavily engaged with the crisis in Ukraine, in Syria, in Taiwan, in Hong Kong. Just a few weeks ago, we saw a huge protest and demonstration in Hong Kong against the Chinese interference in the domestic politics of the people of Hong Kong. And the same thing, as you can see, the latest news around the crisis in Ukraine, when the Ukrainian send missile attack in in the territory of Russia. The people of Russia also, they are facing serious anxiety against Putin. The people of Russia, they become hostage because of the Putin administration. I don't think that you can find any leaders in the world to dominate for 25 years. I remember Putin started 25 years ago, and Mr. Lavrov, the foreign minister of Russia, is for 25 years. They are leading just one group of people.
You don't actually have to look far. It only takes to look over our eastern border to Belarus to see Mr. Lukashenko as well. He's taken his time when it comes to keeping his position in office.
Yes, they are, and also in Moldova, for example, the people of Moldova, they choose to be part of the EU, as well as you mentioned, in Belarus, people they are suffering hugely because of the dictatorship regime in Belarus. So I think that there are a lot of ways for the EU as well as US and Great Britain to use these opportunities on the Central Asian future. We need to maybe think about the new roadmap for the Central Asian business cooperation. We need to make maybe more consultation among the other member of the EU, member of the states in the EU. There are a lot of potential for the EU to build a very strong connection with the Central Asian because of the appetite that we see among the population in Central Asia towards the Western democracy.
I would like to take a moment to take a look at the Organization of Turkic States, which was initiated by the authorities in Turkey. How would you say they are how do they find themselves in this tug of war between Europe and Russia with China when it comes to those Central Asian countries with the creation of that very unit?
To be honest, one of the good things about the decision made by the EU against the Turkish government. For example, if you remember, the Turkish government all the time they were complaining why the EU they do not accept the membership for Turkey. But when you look at the situation of the Afghan refugees or the refugees from Afghanistan, last week I saw the BBC news how the Turkish police treating the refugees from Afghanistan, which was, I think, which was a very serious human rights abuses committed by the Turkish police. They are persecuting, they are torturing refugees from Afghanistan. And the Turkish also, they don't have the same level of reputation in Central Asia because of the human rights, bad track record in human rights in Turkey.
So do you think that Turkey actually has, do you think that Turkey has what it takes to be able to attract their attention or not really? What's your opinion on that?
They have some language, maybe some kind of cultural common background. But when you look at the Turkish economic crisis in Turkey, millions of people in Turkey, they are unemployed. That's why the migration from Turkey, while the refugees from Afghanistan, they are migrating to Turkey because there is no any other option. There is no any other choice to migrate to the Western countries or to the EU. But then the Turkish people also leaving their countries and moving to other EU member of a state. So that's why I'm saying that we have more chance to engage the Central Asian nations, the Central Asian countries into the Western democracy because of the good track record in terms of human rights as well as rule of law, as well as people, they trust the EU. They trust the Western countries because of the history in terms of reliability. They are reliable sources. They are more reliable in terms of investment.
And with that, we will have to.
Yeah.
And with that, we will have to conclude our interview. Unfortunately, our time has come to an end. Nooralhaq Nasimi, Director of Afghanistan and Central Asian Association, thank you so much for joining me on the program.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you.
And so this was all for now here on World Talks, but please do stay tuned as we have more coming up in just a moment here on TVP World.